Florida Live starts now.
Well, good afternoon to you and welcome into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer and thanks for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon live on Fox Local and on YouTube. We are one day away from the 9th anniversary of the shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, and site tours are beginning this afternoon. Ahead of that, allowing victims and survivors and victims, family members to walk through that building for the final time. We'll have more on that in just a minute. I want to let you know a little bit more of what we have going on for you in this next hour here on Fox Local and on YouTube. In about half an hour, we are going to be speaking with an expert and an adjunct professor with the University of Florida about the state of NIL in college athletics. Obviously, a major landscape change with the settlement being approved by a federal judge between the House and the NCAA. We're going to talk about all that coming up in just a little bit. Also, a, quote, persistent and aggressive coastal nuisance is beginning to hatch. We're talking about the saltmarsh mosquito that impacts a number of areas across Florida. We're going to be speaking with officials in Brevard County about what you need to know about those pests and what you can do about them, and what leaders across the state are doing about them as well. But we do begin today with the impending anniversary of the Pulse nightclub shooting, again tomorrow marking 9 years. And in about 1 hour, the first group of survivors and loved ones will be walking through that building for the first time since the shooting and for the final time before that building is torn down to make way for a permanent memorial. Now, just a little bit ago, Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer spoke with reporters outside of the Pulse building to talk about the tours that will begin today, the memorial design process as well, why Orlando wanted to offer this opportunity for those loved ones to experience this and walk through the Pulse nightclub building, and what they hope, their goals, hoping to honor and remember the survivors and the victims. Here's Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer speaking just a few minutes ago.
So tomorrow will mark 9 years since the Pulse tragedy, and I said that morning that our community would not be defined by the demented act of a killer, but it would be defined by our response, and our response would be with love, compassion, and unity, especially for those families that were affected, the survivors that are affected, and we continue to support them 9 years later. With a number of things going on, we are going through an RFP process to select a design build contractor to construct the memorial. I think you guys are up to speed with the last year or so that we spent with our committee to come up with a conceptual design. So part of that conceptual design is resulting in the demolition of the building behind us. We thought it would be appropriate to give families and survivors the opportunity to visit the building. None of them have been in there for the past 9 years, and if it's going to be demolished before the turn of the 10-year event, we thought it'd be appropriate during this time period because a lot of them would have traveled here anyways and are going to be here already. I understand that 25 of the 49 families have accepted the invitation, and then a lot of the other survivors as well. So we'll have that happening. We'll have the memorial service tomorrow, and then hopefully in July we'll select a design build contractor to start moving forward, and we anticipate having completion of the memorial in the summer of 27.
Mayor, you said a few years ago that what happened here at Pulse was undoubtedly the worst thing that's happened since you have been mayor in this town. Would, the memorial finally coming to fruition when you cut the ribbon, when it's open, is that going to be one of the best parts of your mayorship?
I think it will absolutely be a good day, but nothing can bring those 49 back. Nothing can cure the mental anguish that so many people have gone through, and there are different phases of grief and everybody experiences it somewhat differently, but I would hope that a site visit would be helpful to some, but I would also hope that the completion of the memorial would help everybody with a healing process.
Mr. Mayor, I know that so many people have waited for this day to go inside of the club looking and hoping for answers. Do you feel that they will get the answers that they seek by going inside?
I don't know what answers they can get necessarily from visiting, but I think that you see when tragic events happen suddenly that loved ones oftentimes want to visit the location where their loved one came into the tragic injury that caused them to pass. So you see that in accidents on the highway, and likewise I think there are families that it will be helpful to their journey to actually see the place where their loved one passed away. And I'm guessing that a lot of these families have never even seen the Pulse nightclub before, let alone have been inside it. I have been inside the building. I was inside the building 9 years ago. I chose not to go in before it was clean, but after the FBI turned the building back over to the city, I was inside the building then, and I've been inside the building in the last month. Well, there's no furniture. It's just the walls are painted black, floors are black. It's just the, inside of a building. You can see, you'll be able to see where the bathrooms are, where, he had hostages there for several hours at the end of the event. But it's a very emotional thing, and each person is going to experience it, I suspect, very much differently.
How did you feel when you went?
What it did for me is it took me back 9 years, and reflecting on being in the command center on Orange Avenue as all the things are transpiring, and eventually the shooting of the killer, and then the realization of just how many people were impacted. Our original count was way off from what it turned out to be. If you were here 9 years ago, you probably remember when I came out the second time and told everybody it's not 20, it's 49 victims. So that's the thing probably that is sharpest in my memory.
Mayor, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the why. Why this event, these visits, and why the memorial?
The 49 and the families and the other survivors deserve to have a place that memorializes those who were lost, a place that our entire community can reflect on what happened on this site is the why on the memorial. Hopefully the memorial does give some closure, or at least an additional means of healing. And then in terms of the visitation, we think first and foremost of the victims and the families and the survivors, and we do everything that we have done based on what is best for them. And we're not saying you have to go in the building, but what we're doing is saying if that's something that will help you, then we're going to make this available.
Mayor, what's your assessment of looking back over the past 9 years in terms of the reforms and changes that were made? And do you think there needs to be additional reforms and changes? If so, what do you think needs to be done for then a future time?
Well, if you look at when Pulse occurred 9 years ago, it was significant to us because it was in our community. It was also significant because of the number of people that were killed and injured. But it seemed like it was on the forefront. We didn't have mass shootings every single day. There wasn't playbooks on how do you respond to a mass shooting. And now it seems like every other day or every week there's a mass shooting of some sort somewhere in the United States. So that would suggest to me that we don't have the right laws in place, we don't have the resources in place. Everybody, one side will blame guns, one side will blame mental health, but we don't have the right things in place for either one of those arguments.
We know that a lot of the objects that were part of the scene that they tragedy were taken by, people who were in charge of storing them. What's going to happen with those objects? If they're going to
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Okay. So we know that a lot of the objects that were part of the scene that they tragedy had been stored. Do we know what's happening with these objects? Are they going to be part of the
Sure. One of the unsung heroes is the Orange County History Center. The curator there got up, Pam Schwartz, the very day that it happened. She told me she woke up saw what was happening, and wrote a 10-page plan on how to take care of what would be pieces of memorial. And you'll recall that this was all, the building itself back then in the early stages was all roped off, and people couldn't leave things really here. So we set up the front yard of the Performing Arts Center as a temporary memorial site. So there were literally thousands of things that were left there. The History Center has picked up a lot of that stuff, cataloged it, and has it in storage. And they usually bring out different parts of that or different things that they had collected and display it around this time.
Two more questions. Have you met with any of the families who are going to be going in over the next couple of days?
I have not met with the families that are going in, but I think it's been explained to you guys how the process is going to work, right? We're going to gather at a hotel and just bring a few at a time over so that it's not a big crowded mass, and we're going to transport them here and then transport them back. We don't want them having to immediately drive after going inside because, again, we just don't know how it's going to affect some of the people.
Mayor, a lot of things that have been removed from inside of the building, but can we know what actually remains from the day of? We were told, for example, that the window that they used to break through to get to the side of the club was going to get preserved for the actual memorial. So what can they see that it's still the same?
Well, there isn't any furniture in there. It's pretty much just a barren couple of rooms, so you can get the feel for what the space was like, but you're not going to get the full feel of what was it like the night that it happened or any other night that it was open.
Certainly a lot of emotion expected there over the next few hours and days as those site visits continue. We're going to take a break here on Florida Live, but we'll be right back. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon live on Fox Local and on YouTube. It is time now for our Tampa Connection, and for that we go to Fox 13 Tampa Bay, and anchor Lloyd Sowers joining us live now. And Lloyd, we appreciate you joining us this afternoon here on Florida Live.
You're quite welcome, Garrett. Other than being a bit warm outside, we're doing fine here.
All right, glad to hear it. Now let's start with a story out of Pasco County that you're tracking there at Fox 13.
Yeah, that's right, Garrett. A man is dead in Pasco County after he was shot by deputies. They say he fired at them, forcing them to return fire, and we have some body cam video from the sheriff's deputies showing what happened. Take a look.
Shots fired! Shots fired! Get it out! Bud, move out of my way! He has eyes on me. I can't cross. Christian, put it down now! Christian, put it down now! Shots fired! Shots fired! Yeah!
Yeah. Go, 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 go. Back up. Everybody back up. You're last. You're last. Keep the shield.
Yep, yep. He's down. He's down. He is hit. He is hit, but he has the gun in his hand.
Okay. All right.
He's in the living room. He's down.
Okay, you heard him say he's down, referring to that man that they shot. This happened around 8:30 last night off Rose Avenue in the Dade City area of Pasco County. Sheriff's Office says the deputies were at the home to serve a court order for a 25-year-old Christian Javier Estrada Perez, whose family was seeking some mental health evaluations for him at the time. Investigators say they used pepper balls when the man didn't follow commands, leading to the shootout moments later. Take a listen.
His response was to fire 4 rounds from a firearm, which we later learned he had strapped to his hand so that it could not be released. Deputies returned fire, and then as they went in, they were able to check on the status of the subject and realize that he was deceased at that time.
You heard him say he had the gun strapped to his hand, that man who was shot by deputies. The sheriff's office in Pasco County saying 2 of the 7 deputies at the scene fired their guns. No deputies were hurt in this. That's some news about Silver Airways, a major development there. 6 months ago, they declared bankruptcy. Now they have shut down all operations. Silver Airways is out of business. That airline was founded in 2011, based in South Florida, but they had a hub here at Tampa International Airport. They filed for Chapter 11 back in December, promising to continue normal operations. In March, they shut down at Orlando International Airport. Silver Airways continued serving Tampa and some other cities. A statement that you saw there. There's the schedule that is no more for Silver. They say in an attempt to restructure, they entered into a transaction to sell the assets, and they say the holding company they sold to determined not to continue flight operations, instead to take the equipment. They say if you are holding a ticket for Silver, your credit card company or the travel agency should be able to provide you with a refund. Here at Tampa International, 9 departures and 8 arrivals that were scheduled for today have all been canceled. So Silver Airways is out of business now. And a kind of an odd story here from St. Petersburg. This concerns a consignment shop where thousands of dollars worth of designer goods apparently missing, not there anymore. Yeah, they among the sellers, Rich Gorin, he'd been collecting these original art pieces and such. He said they closed without warning. His stuff is gone. He says he went to the store often, but last week he noticed the store was empty and his stuff was nowhere to be found. 2 art pieces and 2 pairs of designer shoes, altogether worth about $17,000, are now missing.
I hope for the best. Maybe it's sitting in a warehouse and they, want to return everything. That's fine. That would be the best case scenario. But the fact that you have a business, people are entrusting you with their valuables, and you just take off. Come on, that's not great.
Yeah, this store in St. Petersburg, this consignment store called Retreat Consignments, is where this happened. The Yelp page for that store is now filled with reviews from people who say they've had no communication. Their stuff is missing too. The guy that you just saw here, Mr. Gorin, says he reported it to the police department in St. Petersburg. Been trying to reach the shop owners. Multiple times, calls and emails to that shop have gone unanswered. Listen.
It's a civil case if they have it and they're not returning it quickly enough, and so that's where that lands. So I don't know what it is. I just know that we just always try to do right by people, and I expect that they seemed like really good people to us, but this isn't looking good.
It's not looking good. It's not looking anything at all. The store is empty, as a matter of fact. Detectives encouraging any other sellers there at Retreat Consignments in St. Pete to call St. Pete Police, let them know what was in the consignment store that isn't there anymore. Right now, it is a mystery of all the consignment merchandise that is gone. Garrett?
Yeah, quite a mystery there. Hoping for some answers for those folks. Fox 13 Tampa Bay anchor Lloyd Sowers, we appreciate you joining us for our Tampa Connection today.
You're welcome.
We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with more Florida Live after this. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon. We are live right now on Fox Local and on YouTube, and we appreciate you joining us. Well, like it or not, billions, yes, that is billions with a B, billions of saltmarsh mosquitoes are ready to hatch. Experts say the time is ripe right now as the summer rains are returning. After months of these larvae, these eggs of these mosquitoes laying dormant. They've just been waiting on these summer rains to rise in the waters when it comes to some of those marshes in order to begin hatching, and that time is beginning now. And they can be a major nuisance. Experts say up to 150 of these saltmarsh mosquitoes can land on a person in just 1 minute. They love to bite. They can also cause a number of issues. The good thing is they're not major disease carriers for humans, but they can cause a number of other problems. And so mosquito control programs across the state are trying to make sure they get this population of mosquitoes under control now before they have to deal with the other populations of mosquitoes that will also begin to flourish in the summertime here. I had the chance to speak with Joseph Faella. He is the Department Director of the Brevard County Mosquito Control Program. Spoke with him about some of their efforts and what people need to know about these saltmarsh mosquitoes.
In Florida, there are over 80, 90 species of mosquitoes, and two of them, known as saltmarsh mosquitoes, specifically Aedes tenurincus and Aedes sollicitans. They're just very prolific, very aggressive species. The eggs are laid in the salt marsh, and we're talking up to 2 billion mosquitoes per acre. So you imagine once they emerge, they're all over the county. So very significant.
And why is now such a bad time for them?
Yeah, so basically in the spring they start emerging because their eggs had been previously laid in the sediment, and then when the water floods the areas, floods the salt marsh, they come out of their dormant stage, and then they emerge in these large quantities. And this is the time of year where that happens. We're in the middle of doing lots of things to kind of keep these numbers down.
We'll get into that in just a second, but why are these such a nuisance?
Mostly because they emerge in such large swarms, and in synchronous swarms. So all at once, they're in people's face. They're flying everywhere. They're getting inside if the doors are open. They're just so aggressive and so numerous.
And I know that in Brevard County, you've talked about a lot of things going on to deal with them. What are some of the things that you are able to do to help get this under control before it gets out of control?
Well, starting in really beginning of the year, about February, we start doing all kinds of things in preparation. We have mosquito impoundments. It's basically water control structures and wetlands where we can capture that water and keep those levels up once the time is right. So the idea is, to hold that water so that mosquitoes can't lay all those eggs. So we look for the opportunity to capture that water, pump it up, and we can't do that until we have some water to pump from. And then we do that really quickly to prevent too much, of emergence at the time. But if we get started early, March, April, and we've been May, and then we're just kind of finishing up all the pumping around the county, we can kind of head off the big emergence or the big spike of the population that would otherwise happen all at once.
You also have fish.
Yes. So speaking of the fish, once we have the water pumping and we have enough to stock fish, we will stock lots of fish. This year so far, we've stocked over 150,000 of the native mosquito fish out there. Normally, we would have to wait until the rainy season starts, which is about this time. But because we're able to pump those areas, we can stock fish as we're pumping.
And how are they able to help with the mosquito population?
So one mosquito fish can eat approximately 100 mosquito larvae per day. So when you're talking thousands of fish, you can knock down the population quite a bit. It's a good way to start, but definitely not the only thing that we do. It takes what we call an integrated approach, where we use several tools. And that is an example of biological control, just like the water levels and the pumping. That's an example of source reduction.
And technology as well plays a role in this.
Yes, definitely. So after we consider the source reduction and biological control options, then we have to deal with the larvae that start hatching from those eggs, and that weren't eaten by the fish. In this example here, we have our drone program, which we've been developing over the last few years. We're able to use EPA or U.S. Environmental Protection Agency approved materials, such as bacillus bacteria, to treat these larvae in large quantities. And the idea is it's to target the species or the mosquitoes while they're in one small place before they get a chance to just kind of spread around the county and fly. Once they get to that point, really all you can do is spray. Spraying is inevitable, but we try to reduce the need for spraying as much as possible. And this isn't only done by drones. In Florida, there are the populations, but sometimes, it's a little hard to appreciate because there are just so many out there. We have mosquitoes that are coming from natural areas and preserves that we either cannot treat because of the agreements that we have with those organizations, or we have limitations on how much we can treat. So sometimes we can you can do all the proactive measures we can within the county jurisdiction, but we just keep having those mosquitoes fly in the billions into the county. So basically, we just ask for people to have patience. Once everything kind of the levels come up and the fish get spread around and all the treatments are working, things should settle down, and then our concern becomes more in the vector species on the mainland, and managing for diseases such as West Nile virus and Eastern equine encephalitis. But in the meantime, what people can do is, of course, give us a call. Give us a call, whether it's our program or one of the other coastal programs. Let us know. Make sure we all have lots of surveillance in place. We have traps around the county. We will probably will have detected it already, but sometimes it's good to get the phone calls to understand where there's a concentration. We'll address it as best we can, as fast as we can, and at the home, basically, make sure your screens are in good repair. Residents should make sure that they don't leave doors open, especially in windows and doors open, especially at sunrise and sunset when the mosquitoes are most active. And really, it's best to try to avoid being outdoors during those times. You would be surprised, just a couple of hours after sunset or before or after after sunset, mosquitoes settle down quite a bit. They're still out there, but they settle down quite a bit. But if you have to be out there, wear long sleeves, long pants, and then you have EPA approved repellents that you can use, such as DEET and picaridin related products, IR 3535. Just make sure it's EPA approved and you're using it according to the instructions. And other than that, not so much for saltmarsh species, but for the some of the other species out there, any standing water on the property, dump those containers, just get rid of the excess water. And you'd be surprised how much it would make a difference right immediately around your home.
Yeah, so be prepared for that, but also take some of these steps, and these are important steps for dealing with any type of mosquitoes. So even if you don't live along some of those areas, the more coastal areas where these salt marsh mosquitoes cause problems, here's some good tips for dealing with any mosquitoes. This time of year, especially here in Florida, that's getting rid of standing water around your home. As Joseph Faella was telling us, dress in long sleeves and long pants when you can, when you're having a lot of problems with them. Defending yourself by using EPA-approved repellents. And then, of course, dusk and dawn. Those are the times that these mosquitoes are most active. And so that may be a time that you may want to avoid being outdoors. And as Faella was describing, sometimes it doesn't take long before or after dusk or dawn that the mosquitoes really kind of calm down a little bit. So certainly something to keep in mind as we start to see the hatching of those salt marsh mosquitoes in some of those grasslands and coastal mangrove areas. We are going to take a quick break here on on Florida Live, but we'll be right back after this here on Fox Local and on YouTube. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us here on this Wednesday afternoon. United Natural Foods, according to multiple reports, effectively had to shut down its deliveries after a cyber attack. Now, if you're not familiar with that company, they're a major food distributor. They are also a main supplier of Whole Foods Market. According to the New York Post, a regulatory filing shows that officials with that company discovered this issue, this cyber attack last week, and they had to take their systems offline to investigate it. At this point, according to what we've seen, it's still having those ongoing issues. So we'll see where things go from here. But we talked about what we can learn from this with Matt Rose, who's the CXO of Tech Rage IT in Winter Springs. He joined me on Fox 35 News Plus this morning to break this all down for us.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're not going to give out too many details. I know they filed because of the requirements they have. But whatever it is obviously enough that they felt the need to take it offline, or they could be recovering from an attack that already happened. You know, the wording is obviously somewhat the best public relations they can have on it. So I don't know how much the public will know. I mean, we probably will get some more information, but right now I would just have to assume ransomware, something of that nature, but that's complete assumption at this point.
When we hear that they do have to, take that network offline, that they have to shut that system down in order to be able to restore it safely, what does that tell us? Is that a typical way to respond to something like this?
So let's just assume if it was a ransomware attack, most security researchers are going to tell you that they may take it offline, meaning they're isolating their systems from the internet. But like a security researcher actually doesn't want somebody to shut down a computer or a server that's actively had an attack, because when you shut it down, you lose a lot of what's in memory that they're able to do forensics on to try to figure out what happened, whether it's for recovery or even just trying to figure out the source. So at this point, my assumption is they've isolated it. And again, that's a term we use where it can happen with a specific computer. It can be a server that it's sort of still running, like someone can plug in a cable and a keyboard and everything to the server, but it's not able to access the internet, but it allows them to still pull logs off. So I would assume that's what really is happening at this point. And a lot of times what'll happen is you don't get into a recovery phase until you sort of know if you can recover, until you know were your backups affected, how far back were they affected, because sometimes it's, okay, it just happened today, we can restore from yesterday. Other times they're trying to find out when the attack started.
So this process of trying to restore could stretch on.
It could, there's terms in any business you look at how long it takes you to recover and how quickly you want to be able to recover from. And that's kind of a point of how often you're doing backups and then how long it takes you to restore. And like I said, I don't even know if they may not even be in the restoration phase. Their restoration could only take hours, but until they get kind of the all clear that if they bring everything back online, they may be told that they have to do things via paper, which is probably what they're doing. They're probably going back to old school situations right now.
I'm sorry, paper? What's that?
You might have a few pieces of that on your desk there.
Right. Yeah, but when you're talking about big business like that, I mean that's a total different kind of system, all kinds of different hurdles and obstacles and things that nowadays we're really not kind of built to handle and have to deal with things that way when it comes to these transactions or tracking deliveries, all those things that companies are doing.
Yeah, and I mean, typically a company this size, typically a company of almost any size should have something where they have a disaster recovery or a incident response plan, depending on what the exact situation is. And usually you want to practice it, but it's hard to practice it fully. Very few companies, I think, fully shut down their system and say this, but they should have some internal processes. Is it great for their clients? Is it great for anyone else? Probably not, but I would assume there's some business going on. It's just incredibly slow for them. And as you said, there's probably people who have never worked with paper or never worked with the processes they may be doing at this point.
And so when we're looking at an attack like this, obviously something that's causing a lot of disruption, and that seems to be a bit of a trend that we are seeing, these bad actors kind of targeting it and looking for ways that they can cause these large scale disruptions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of, so it's interesting. Things like ransomware where they're getting money is still a major piece to what what an attacker wants. But now that's also sometimes they know that they can cause a disruption. They can ask for money for control, for holding data. It's possible they're holding data hostage and they're trying to figure out what's real. There's so much that could be going on. And the whole idea here is understanding that the more they disrupt business, the amount of money they're causing this company or others to lose. And especially this one where they're a supplier for other large companies. As you mentioned, Whole Foods, they're probably freaking out or trying to find their supplies. And it also shows how you really have to look at your upstream and downstream providers and think of, for Whole Foods, hopefully they've had some sort of a plan to what happens if, because now look, they're struggling as well.
Any lessons to be learned or things to keep in mind for regular folks to, from this?
I mean, I think from regular folks or just any size business, not even anything this size, and we've talked about this before in general, and it kind of, the theme never stops, is that you have to look at who you're doing business with, and even from a personal standpoint, what sites are you using? What are you reliant upon? What are they doing for security? What would you do if they're down? And it's some of the same questions you ask from a business. As part of a business, you should be looking at your suppliers and saying, what would happen if insert supplier here was unavailable? What would happen if they had an attack? Are they connected to your systems? Where could they get in? Because that's another thing that, depending on what kind of attack is going on, does Whole Foods have some sort of a connection to their systems? Because did they get into Whole Foods? Did they get into anybody else? So you really have to look at kind of upstream and downstream, not just having a plan for what happens if and when they go down, but also what can they potentially get into if something happens there.
We'll be right back with more Florida Live after this. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon, live on Fox Local and on YouTube. A federal judge has approved a settlement between the House and the NCAA, which allows colleges now to directly pay players, college student athletes. Schools, there are a couple of nuances to this, and I'll just list a couple here, and that's that schools have a max of $20.5 million to share with athletes, and all NIL deals over $600 will have to be registered with a clearinghouse called NIL Go. So will this provide the stability and consistency and answers to some questions that the sport needs, that the industry of college athletics needs, or will it open the door to more problems? Joining us live now to talk about all of this and break some of this down for us is Christy Dosh, who is the founder of the Business of College Sports and an adjunct professor at the University of Florida as well, not to mention the author of The Athlete's NIL Playbook, The Complete Guide to Owning and Profiting from Your Name, Image, and Likeness, a book that was just published, and as I understand it, Christy published early because of all of this going on, so certainly a timely topic to be writing about.
Yeah, it has been interesting timing for this with the book, and I'm in Orlando at the NACTA convention, which is all of the athletic directors in Division I, and so we've all been here talking about this for days.
So a lot to talk about. First, just give me your reaction to the settlement and kind of what has come out from this, and what you think it may mean.
Yeah, we've known about the broad strokes of this settlement for months now. We were just waiting for the judge to give it final approval. It looks very much like we expected. There's $2.8 billion of back pay to previous student athletes and even some current student athletes who were active prior to the new NIL rules that went into effect in 2021. So that's one piece of it. And then you've got revenue sharing going forward. Like you mentioned, it's $20.5 million per team. They can decide where to be in that. You don't have to share the full 20.5. You can share less than that, but that's the ceiling. And you alluded to whether there are going to be future problems. That ceiling is a potential future problem, but the rest of it very much looked like we expected. The timing is a little different with the clearinghouse. I think folks believed they would have until July 1st for that to begin. And in fact, deals struck as of June 7th have to be entered into the clearinghouse. And I believe it just went live today. So that came a little earlier than expected.
When you talk about the clearinghouse, we've seen some reporting. I saw some reporting in The Athletic, some other places that some officials may have some doubts about how effective that whole kind of part of this process may be. What are you hearing and what do you think?
I've heard a lot of administrators here this week say, well, who's going to make sure that athletes disclose these deals? Because a lot of schools already had rules in place that athletes had to disclose their NIL deals directly to the school over the last 4 years. And they tell me that they think 5 to 20% of athletes actually turned in those disclosures. And so I decided to go to the athletes, and I texted about a dozen athletes yesterday, small sample size, but they're all at Power 4 institutions. They're all high earners. And I said, have you ever heard of NIL Go? And I didn't give them any other context. And none of them had any idea what I was talking about. When I said, hey, it's where you've got to disclose your deals over $600, one came back and told me that she had heard that was going to happen. The rest are totally unaware of it. And so there's going to be a lot of education for athletes coming up this summer.
There's been a lot of talk over the past couple of years about the transfer portal, about transfers in college athletics. Does something like this, where you may effectively be able to have some contracts with these players, will that impact that? Will that slow down some of those moving parts in the transfer portal that we have seen the past few years?
It could. Schools could offer multi-year contracts and try to lock players in longer, but we haven't actually seen very many of those. I've seen quite a few revenue sharing contracts. I've been talking with other attorneys who are here this week about the ones they've seen. We have seen very, very few that are multi-year contracts, but that would be an option to try to lock players in. Would there still be ways for them to get around it? Potentially, you could have buyouts like you have in a coach's contract. So maybe that's what we'll see coming. This first year, I think, is going to be a little rocky as everybody figures out what works best.
The big money makers often are football and basketball. What does something like this mean for some of those other sports that maybe aren't that high profile, that aren't raking in that much cash?
We are seeing schools decide to share revenue with other sports, women's basketball. I know of some schools that are sharing with volleyball, softball. I've seen men's ice hockey at a school. So it's completely different from one school to the next. We certainly expect that the bulk of the money is going to go to football and men's basketball, which probably raises some Title IX lawsuit issues. And in fact, I just saw before we got on that we already have a case filed on a Title IX issue. So I would imagine there will be more of those coming. But I also think it'll be interesting to see there are roster limits that are part of this settlement as well. Many of those roster limits are below the average roster size that sports currently carry. And that's true even for football. So for example, some football teams might have a roster last year that was 150 athletes. Well, they're now going to have a roster limit of 105. And so you actually, I think, might see talent disperse a little bit because the schools at the top aren't going to be able to hoard all the best players because of the new roster limits.
You mentioned some of the potential legal challenges. We're not done seeing this with this. This certainly isn't settled. What do you think? Where do you think things go with some of those challenges, whether it's Title IX, whether it's some other areas?
There are outstanding challenges that weren't solved by this lawsuit. This lawsuit settled 3 lawsuits that were outstanding, but there are others about antitrust, labor and employment law, Title IX, you name it. Those still exist, and more are going to continue to be filed, and potentially even filed about the settlement itself, whether it's Title IX or it's over the opportunities that are being taken away with the roster limits, issues with the cap itself. Even the judge in this case sort of looked at the antitrust issue with there being a cap and said that she didn't have enough information to decide if it was a problem, so she was going to go ahead and approve the settlement. But we could very quickly see a challenge to the cap itself. And people always say, but there's caps in professional sports. There are, but those are collectively bargained by the athletes because they're employees, and we don't have that in college sports.
Still very much shifting ground here. And so what's the main impact at this point right now for student athletes here in Florida?
Yeah, here in Florida, we now have high school at the NIL level. In fact, I was just meeting this morning with some folks who educate high school athletes here in Florida about their NIL and teach them personal branding earlier on so that by the time they get to college, they have that ability to earn on their NIL, because the revenue sharing is just one piece of this pie. We still have NIL, which started 4 years ago. It's still going strong. We see new brands come into this space every single day. And that is a place where we see Olympic athletes who maybe aren't going to be getting revenue sharing still earning significant sums of money from brand deals for social media. They make money on public speaking. I know an athlete who wrote a book who sold over 10,000 copies of her book. There are so many ways that athletes can monetize, and those aren't going away. They're only going to continue to grow.
What's next on this front that we should be watching for as things continue to evolve?
Oh, yeah. As we go into this first school year with revenue sharing, it'll be interesting to see how schools manage it. Who do they choose to give the money to? How much do they give here at the beginning versus waiting for the transfer portal to open? Because if you give it all here at the beginning, you've got to wait till July 1st of 2026 before the amount replenishes again, and you can go up to that ceiling once again. So cap management, as they're calling it, is going to be really key this first year.
We also expect Congress to potentially act on some of these issues as well. So who knows what kind of all that might bring.
I do not expect Congress to act. They have had a number of bills over the last 5 years related to NIL. Not a single one has ever made it out of committee. So I really do not expect anything on that front.
Okay, so one less thing to worry about there, I guess. Well, Christy Dosh, the founder of the Business of College Sports, an adjunct professor at the University of Florida, also the author of the Athlete's NIL Playbook, the complete guide to owning and profiting from your name, image, and likeness. And Christy, I would say it's safe to say that you will have plenty of material for a second edition very, very soon.
Yes, thankfully it's not outdated yet, but hopefully it'll hold for a little while.
All right. Well, Christy, really appreciate you joining us this afternoon here on Florida Live.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to take a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us here this afternoon. The Jacksonville Jaguars let fans watch minicamp today. It was open to the public. Let folks inside to check that out as Trevor Lawrence, Travis Hunter, some of the returning players, new head coach, new general manager as well, hoping to turn around the team's fortunes after what was a disappointing season last year. We heard from head coach Liam Cohen a little bit ago, who says he likes what he's seeing so far from the defense.
No, they've done a good job, man. It's always good to have back and forth, and I think the defense has really improved. I think over the last week, where you see a solid improvement out of these guys.
It seems like you guys have had a steady increase in competition. It got a little chippy today. Is that something that you want to see at this point, obviously, and then moving into training camp?
Yeah, I mean, we have been. I mean, it's been really calm out here, which is good. And also, when you do amp up the competition, there's going to be a little bit of chipping, and that's the first actual disagreement our players have had out on the grass. So, it's not, I'm not promoting it. It's just it's going to happen in football, and those guys, they know once we walk off the grass, we're one team, and that's just the way it works.
I wanted to ask you about the phrase "celebrate with your teammates." I've heard that a lot out there. Why is that so important at this time of year?
Just training, right? Just training to. It's not easy, right? This game, this league is not easy. It's not easy to win. It's not easy to score. It's not easy to defend. And so when we do things right, it's going to have to become second nature. And we don't want to be excessive, but also we want to make sure that we're celebrating the moments that ultimately are going to help lead us to success and big plays and having energy and juice. It doesn't have to be forced, but also you want to be able to celebrate it when it does occur and not just act like, we just did something really ordinary, right? It's not ordinary to win in this league. It's hard. And so we want to be able to have the right mindset when playing.
How much do fans help that energy?
Yeah, it was great to have the fans. I really appreciate them being out here today, taking the time, throughout this time, knowing that it's not probably the most entertaining all that much, but really felt them. The players I know fed off that, especially some of the younger guys feeling some of that support as being rookies. Never having a practice quite like this with fans here. So really appreciate everybody coming out this week, today especially.
Pretty cool to be able to see that as fans. Well, that's going to do it for us here on Florida Live. We appreciate you joining us on this Wednesday afternoon, live on Fox Local and on YouTube. We'll be right back here again tomorrow at 2 o'clock with more Florida Live. If you're watching us on Fox Local Orlando, we'll be back at 4 o'clock as well with Fox 35 News Plus. So thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. And if you are watching out for some of those storm chances,
Florida Live starts now.
Well, good afternoon to you and welcome into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon live on Fox Local and on YouTube. We are one day away from the 9th anniversary of the shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, and site tours are beginning this afternoon ahead of that, allowing victims or survivors and victims' family members to walk through that building for the final time. We'll have more on that in just a minute. I want to let you know a little bit more of what we have going on for you in this next hour here on Fox Local